Good day, my name is Leonardo Cordero and we are here to present our research study on assessing and spreading awareness to the impact of flooding to college students in Intramuros, Manila. So first, the abstract. In here we presented that the research was conducted to prepare a study for the impact of flooding to the college students in Intramuros, Manila, and to spread the awareness to the concerns of the students. The aim of the research was to determine the crucial impacts that have to do with the students' welfare. More than half of the students are having difficulties in transportation, regarding to the access of the UV Express, buses, jeepneys, and other mode of transportation. The most common health impacts that flooding affects the students are fatigue, stress, and fever, which also affects the students' educational performance. The researchers hope to draw the attention of the local government unit and other respective companies relating to the transportation, health, and other universities. So, introduction. First, the background of the study. Flooding, as you know, is a common issue in Intramuros, Manila. It is one of the most flood-prone areas within Metro Manila. So, there was an article states that the DPWH completed a 2-kilometer drainage pumping station which is said to address the flooding in Intramuros, Manila and in other parts of Manila such as the City Hall place, but up to now, until there is still flooding everywhere which is not properly managed. So the statement of the problem, as you know, flooding causes a big disturbance to the students. It has negative impacts in health, school performance, and day-to-day basis. So our objective of the study is to finish conducting the 200 respondent survey. So the objective of our study is to finish conducting an online survey to gather data needed. Our respondents was about 113 to 200, but due to difficulties, we only managed to gather 113 correspondents. So we also our objective was to determine if the location of the school with respect to the students' homes has an impact to them. Also to determine if transportation is an issue for the students when flooding occurs. And also to know which negative impact has an effect on the students' health and educational performance. And also to be able to spread concern. Also to be able to know and spread the concerns of the students when there is flood. So our scope and limitations. First, we conducted the research for the concerns of the students, which involves the perception of 100 to 200 respondents, and also the main source of the data was the online questionnaire. The study was conducted for the span of 10 weeks.
So, hello, my name is Luis Fernando Nueva Santiago, and we're here to talk about the Chapter 2, which is review of related literature. So, the aim of this research or the related literature is this chapter presents the related literature and studies both from local and foreign sources. This includes the various effects of flooding on people, which will be used to further understand and comprehend the effect it will have to students studying in the premise of Intramuros, Manila. So here's a little study work of Brussels-based Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters, where the Philippines is the #1 country on the list of nations most in danger of facing normal and more intense storms. This research is conducted year 2008, which where Philippines was one of the 3 countries hit by most disasters. So a little summary of some literatures that we have reviewed and read. So the causes of flooding in the review literatures that we read here are causes of floods, illegal settlers, people throwing waste everywhere, which causes clogs on drainage, urbanization and poor drainage system and unsupervised hydrological infrastructures. It shows the direct and indirect causes or effects of floods to transportation, and shows variety of health issues to people. So here are some different methods used by the literatures. So first is the structural stormwater management, which focuses on the physical intervention and invest in engineering infrastructures for improving the drainage systems. And second is the non-structural stormwater management, focuses on preventative actions and rely predominantly on behavioral changes in order to be effective. And topography. Topography is the study which the MMDA use to find out the flood-prone areas in Metro Manila, and which is a detailed descriptions or presentation on a map of natural and artificial features of the area. So management strategies for low-income urban communities, and FRA, flood risk assessment, which is an assessment of how big the risk in the area of floods, or simply identifies the level of flood risk in our area. So here is a figure from Project NOAA flood hazard maps. This is a 5-year flood hazard map of Intramuros, and this is a 25-year flood hazard map of Intramuros. So some discussions. So the problems in Intramuros, Manila, mainly is the drainage systems, especially on some historical sites, which becomes a catch basin when the roads are getting flooded. People, especially students, have a hard time commuting or going to their schools due to the drainage system that causes floods. Also like in our RL, we can see that there are many similarities in problems that causes flood, like in forms of destroying waste on the street, which cause the drainage systems causing floods. So lastly is here are some of the department. Here are the ways that the government actually solve some issues on flooding, where the Department of Public Works of Highways, or DPWH, has completed 203.4 million flood control projects that is seen elevated flooding around the vicinity of Manila City, including Intramuros during rainy seasons. And here are other projects which the DPWH use.
Hi, good day everyone. I'm John Patrico, and I'm here to discuss about the methodology. Methodology has the research design. In research design, we use the quasi-experimental design, not the experimental design, but the quasi-experimental design. With this design, it helped us not randomly select people. We chose a certain group of people that will connect with us, that will answer our surveys, that will tell us the answers accurately. With this design also, it helped us to accurately measure the substantial prospects for this research. So our target was the students within the Intramuros. So that is the participants of the study. So the participants of the study is the inside of the Intramuros.
Good afternoon, my name is Eric Fadrigalan. I'll be discussing to you the instruments used for data gathering. For the instrument we used, we utilize an online survey. The reason we use this is because it's convenient. It's the best way to gather data with the research we utilized. It's got a wide range in the sense that we can provide it to anyone as long as they have internet access. It's economic in the sense that we do not use any kind of resources other than those we already have. It's accessible, like I said. Anyone who has internet access may answer the online survey and give us data. We gathered data for the flood awareness of the students, the effects of flooding on health, on the time of students, the route they take, the transportation. basically any kind of impact that they would have to their lives. Um, for the procedure, I'll be discussing the multiple steps we took for the procedure. We formulated the study, we got the approval for it, we got the location, and then obtained the instrument. We distributed the survey, we analyzed the data gathered, and then I'll show you the survey questions that we utilized. The formulation of the study. We based it on the research questions. What are the impacts of flooding in roads and transportation to students? Which among these impacts have the most adverse effects? How do these issues affect the students? So as I mentioned earlier, students are the best source of data for this study because they have the first-hand experience on everything we're looking for. We based our conclusions primarily on the students, but we also took into account the other scholarly articles that we studied, as seen in the RRL. So here's the letter for the approval of the study. We got the approval from Engineer John Paul Carrion. We got this approval after revisions to the idea for our study. For the location of the study, as mentioned earlier, it is within the confines of Intramuros, so we chose students that study within Intramuros. These students came from Mapua, Lyceum, Colegio de San Juan de Letran, Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. So for obtaining the instrument, we made the survey based on the need for the data to be used in the study. That's about it for the instrument. We simply made the online survey based on the data we need. For the distribution of the survey, we sent our online survey, the link to it, to multiple students, hopefully getting their responses. For this, we got 113 respondents, and again, these 113 respondents came from Mapua, Lyceum, Letran, and PLM. Analyzing data gathered. We analyzed the data gathered based on responses within the provided survey. The primary effects, as we concluded, were based on the most common effects according to the responses. And these effects consist of the problems that with regards to the health, time, studies, transportation, and route. As you can see here, these are the survey questions we used. We used a total of 17 questions utilizing the different, as mentioned earlier, we asked them about the different effects and their awareness towards flooding. Thank you.
Good day, my name is Abjit Pising and I'll be presenting the discussion and results of our research study. This pie graph represents the school of our respondents. Based on this graph, which includes the 4 colleges and universities, the majority of our respondents attends college at Mapua University, while the other 40% is roughly divided among the 3 other learning institutions. This pie graph represents the awareness of our respondents about the occurrence of flood in Intramuros area. More than half, or exactly 53.1% of our respondents acknowledge the occurrence of flood inside, hence the awareness of our respondents about the occurrence of flood in Intramuros area. More than half, or exactly 53.1% of our respondents acknowledges the occurrence of flood inside is very disturbing, while 24.8% acknowledges the occurrence of flood but acknowledges it as a slight nuisance that doesn't greatly affect their lives when flood occurs. On the other hand, 15% of our respondents are neutral when it comes to this subject, and the remaining others are not affected by the flood itself. This graph represents the percentage of respondents who commutes to school. More than half, or exactly 56.6% of our respondents commutes daily to school, while 25.7% commute sometimes and 7.7% never commutes going to school. This graph shows the percentage of people who get stranded when there is flood. This means that they either can't go home or will be delayed because of the flood. Based on this graph, the majority of our respondents get stranded sometimes due to flood. This mainly depends on the severity of the flood, while on the other hand, 5.3% of our respondents never get stranded during flooding. All of these respondents that answer that they never get stranded live within the walls of Intramuros area. This graph shows the percentage of students who experiences trouble in an event of flooding. The majority of the students, which is 34.5%, experiences trouble or has a hard time going to school. This trouble may translate directly into poor academic performance due to physical and emotional stress and the fact that they may miss their class. This graph shows the travel time of a student whenever there is flood. Based on their origin, the travel time of a student is affected if they live further from intramuros. This graph shows that most of our respondents live within intramuros. These students are the ones who live in dormitories and are the ones who are not greatly affected by the flood because they live closer to their schools. This graph shows the most common of transportation used by the students. The top three most common mode of transportation are UV Express, followed by bus and then jeepneys. The most commonly used mode of transportation is pedicab. The next most commonly used mode of transportation is pedicab, which only caters point-to-point transport within intramuros. This graph shows the percentage of students who finds it difficult to go in or out intramuros whenever there is a flood. This graph shows that 73.5% of the students notices that there are a lot of road obstructions in intramuros. An example of these obstructions are illegally parked cars, sidewalk vendors, and garbage that are thrown around. This graph shows the percentage of students who encounters issues with transportation whenever there is flood. 38.9% who chose always are the ones who live further from intramuros, while the ones who answered never lives within the walls of intramuros. This graph shows the most difficult mode of transportation to use in an event of flood. The most difficult mode of transportation, according to our respondents, is jeep, followed by UV Express, and then bus. This graph shows the percentage of students whose academic performance is hindered or affected by flooding. 72.6% of our respondents answered that their school performance is affected negatively by flooding, while 27.4% said that it is not affected. This graph represents the percentage of students who suffered from either physical or mental sickness due to flooding. 73.5% of our respondents have at least one experience of sickness due to flooding. This graph shows the most common sickness experienced by the respondents. The most common sickness experienced or acquired by the respondents are stress, fatigue, and fever. According to our respondents, this graph is based on a 1 to 5 scale, which 1 for the best and 5 is bad. And according to our respondents, the transportation to and from intramuros is mainly subjective and depends on where you live, but there are more respondents who rated transportation to be the worst. In terms of roads, pathways, and footway, according to our respondents, the condition of roads, pathways, and footway in intramuros is very average. According to our respondents, the drainage within intramuros is poor and needs improvement. According to our respondents, the school disturbance caused by flooding is average. And this graph shows the suggestions and concerns of the respondents. While 93.8% answered no, the other 6.2% had suggestions, such as early suspension of classes, fixing drainage, open manholes, and health concerns due to flooding.
So lastly, let's talk about Chapter 5, the summary, conclusion, and recommendation of the study. So first, to summarize the results, half of the respondents commutes in a daily basis. Most of them get stranded due to the way they go home or they go to school, which is the commuting. So the most in-demand and difficult access. So the most in-demand vehicles are UV Express and bus, and the most difficult to access is the jeepney. So most pathway in Intramuros has obstructions in roads due to the garbage, as stated earlier, and other uneven roads and improper drainage. And transportation is the main issue. Almost 50 respondents agreed to it that jeepney, bus, and UV and Grab or taxi are difficult to access. And almost 1/4 of the students are affected by the impacts of the flood in health and education. The top three main health effects are fatigue, stress, and fever. So our conclusion was that the transportation and pathway problems are the main concern of the students. Also that the bus and jeepneys are difficult to access. The exposure to flood can affect the mental and physical health of the students, which can lead to bad performance in their education. And our recommendation is that the study is to be used by the local government units or other government agency or other companies for better flood management, and also to focus on the management of the drainage system and focus on the safety of the students. And lastly, to use the study to understand the concerns of the students to avoid the same occurrence in the future. Thank you.